Welcome back to the Free Spirits Podcast, where we get into the functional and THC beverage industries. We will be exploring the brand stories and operations that redefine how we relax, connect, and socialize. I'm your host, Lars Miller, and here with my co-host, David Gonzalez. Before we jump in, quick reminder, be sure to check out our YouTube channel. Subscribe, follow us on whatever podcast platform you use. If you give us a rate and review, it really does help us a lot. Joining us today is Kerry Hinkle, Director of Membership and Public Affairs at the US Hemp Roundtable. Kerry has been instrumental in shaping hemp policy at both the state and federal levels, working with multi-million and billion-dollar companies to secure hemp-friendly legislation. His journey in the cannabis industry began just before the 2018 Farm Bill was signed, giving him unique insight into the industry's evolution. Welcome, Kerry.
Hey, Lars. Hey, David. Thanks for having me today. Excited for the conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining. So, Kerry, one of the first questions I had for you was, the hemp industry has had some major changes since 2018 specifically. And as someone who started in the CBD retail side of things and who now shapes policy, can you walk us through that evolution, in particular, how products like Delta 8 changed the landscape during COVID? And has your retail experience informed your current policy work?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So before the 18 Farm Bill, I started working at a CBD American Shaman shop in Indianapolis, where I'm originally from. I just walked in one day when I was working at Jimmy John's, and they were paying me like $8 an hour at Jimmy John's, and the guy at the CBD shop said he'd paid me $12 an hour. So that was a big motivation for getting into the industry, was just making a couple extra bucks more while I made my way through college. So I started selling gross tinctures that you stuck under your tongue, and I would tell my customers, if it tastes bad, it works good, and it was a real nascent industry at the time. I can definitely remember, I was working at the shop for a few years. There was opportunities and shaping legislation in Indiana where the attorney general at the time was trying to say that CBD was illegal, and that the US Hemp Roundtable came in, and I'd kind of heard peripherally about them, and that they were lobbying to protect my business, and ultimately defeated the effort that the attorney general was trying to make CBD illegal at the time. So I started following what they were doing. And before I got this job, I had never even met a politician. And I remember when I first got the job, they were like, well, we'll start you off with a few hours a week. We need somebody to handle membership, but it was, by no means a full-time job. And so I would be working in the CBD shop, and we're like, we got to do something about this Delta 8 problem. The Hemp Roundtable was instrumental in passing the 2018 Farm Bill. And, at the time, there was a reason why it was just Delta 9 THC is what was written in the Farm Bill, because that was all that we knew that got you high at the time. And so I would be on a call about, we got to do something about Delta 8, right? I'm like, yeah, I know for sure. I'm like, hold on, I have a customer. And I would turn around and sell them some Delta 8 products, right? And then I'd get back on the Zoom and be like, yeah, I know this is kind of crazy. And that was at the height of COVID, right? The CBD boom has happened. Folks that tried it once didn't like that gross tincture, said, maybe CBD is just not for me. So I have seen that market evolve all the way to where we are now, which I have a feeling we'll talk a lot about, is this low dose hemp beverage, 5 milligrams at my local liquor store. It's been this fascinating evolution and market maturity of the hemp industry that I've seen over the 6+ years now, to where now, if I want to, 2 milligrams is too much, I need 1.5. I like CBG, or I like CBN, right? This real dialed in evolution in hemp products, and the advancement of cannabis science in general, I think has been increased by decades because of this evolution and kind of market testing that has become hemp. So I'm happy to kind of go wherever you guys want to on this. But yeah, over 6 years, it's kind of fun to see the evolution of hemp products for sure.
Absolutely. One of the questions I had to follow up with that is there any validity to the notion that you coined the term red state weed? And if so, where did that come from? Where did that moniker come from?
Yeah. I've definitely used it on many shows in the past. I don't know if I can get credit for that, but I do enjoy it, especially living in Kentucky, where we technically have a medical market, but it's not up yet, and who knows when we're going to get it. So, and again, I was in Indiana at the time, right? So those are both states without legal marijuana, and I've seen customers coming into my store that were little old ladies that had, pain on their hands, and I just rubbed that little bit of cream on them, and that aha moment, right? And so to see those kinds of real world benefits are still something I carry with me. And because you called it hemp, you were able to sell it in some of these states where, people didn't have access to cannabis medicines. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's an interesting thing that you just have to call it hemp, and all of a sudden you can have the products.
I am also a fellow Hoosier.
Great.
By birth, at least. So I moved to Florida a few years ago. So just a little bit further south than you.
Sure. Yeah. I'm originally from Indianapolis and Anderson, so that's great. Yeah. Go Hoosiers.
Nice. Yes, go Hoosiers. So obviously, Congress extended the Farm Bill, I believe, through the end of 2025. So we have, another full year of negotiations ahead. What are the roundtable's key priorities as these discussions continue for 2025?
Yeah, yeah. So, and I think it was January 25th, we held a big DC lobby day. We had about 35 companies fly up. We met with over 50 members of Congress and their staff, and we had a luncheon where Senator Wyden from Oregon, he spoke at. And so our two priorities heading into the year are, one, to secure some federal regulation of hemp extracts. Now, I feel a little bit like Groundhog's Day, especially when I go to DC and I'm meeting with the same staffers over and over. We're on a first name basis. And it's like, hey, Kerry, good to see you. Still want those hemp regs? I'm like, yes. That would be great. So it is rare for an industry to come to Congress and say, please make it harder for me to sell my products. And yet that is what the hemp industry does, is we go and we ask for regulation. And, what the Wyden bill that was introduced in September, and we hope to have it reintroduced in the coming months, we need to find a Republican lead on the bill in the Senate and also find a companion bill in the House. It just sets up some simple common sense guidelines like standardized labeling, truth in packaging. If it contains THC, then we should sell to 21 and over. But what we're bullish about on the prospects of it too is that it still keeps intact states' rights. So states, unfortunately, still have the ability to be more restrictive or more lenient on the ability to regulate their hemp extracts. So that is one. It's kind of funny to talk about labeling as a huge priority because that's not the most exciting topic, but especially on a 60 milliliter tincture where you can only fit so many words when every different state has a different requirement. Yesterday I got a call about the sticker requirement in Georgia. Is that sticker requirement still in place? And can I ship that product there or not? And so, that complexity makes it really hard for interstate commerce and for folks to be able to ship their products across state lines. So one is getting the Wyden bill across the line and hopefully having some guardrails in place. And then two, it's still pushing back on any effort to change the definition of hemp in the Farm Bill. So we saw in spring of last year where Congresswoman Mary Miller from Illinois introduced the Mary Miller Amendment, as we've all deemed it now, which would have banned all products that contained any amount of THC in them. Thankfully, the amendment was written so poorly that it's really gotten no traction at all. It inadvertently sweeps in grain and fiber farmers. And in all my years doing this, I've never been in a meeting on the Hill and someone said, you can't use this in door paneling or in rope or anything like that. And yet Mary Miller's amendment was so bad, it was going to impact those folks too. So, and Chairman Thompson, who is the House Republican lead over the Agriculture Committee, so he has, first say over what the Farm Bill is going to look like. He has told us, and he's also mentioned in Bloomberg, that the Mary Miller amendment has no traction, that it's dead. Now, Senator Stabenow from Michigan, when she retired last year, released a Senate Farm Bill that does have a different definition of hemp. It's nowhere near as restrictive as the Mary Miller Amendment would have been, but it does still eliminate some products that are on the market. So, people have built businesses and people have jobs and farmers are growing crops based on a definition of the 2018 Farm Bill. And we as a country have never legalized a crop and then gone back and recriminalized it in a Farm Bill. So we want to keep that definition of hemp the same, and we would like to see some common sense guardrails in place so folks and businesses can thrive.
I believe you've mentioned the importance of raising the limits to 1% from the 3% in the past. Can you explain why that's crucial for farmers?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure most of your listeners too, being in this industry, know of a horror story of a farmer where, it was hot one day or it rained the next and their THC content spiked to 0.4, 0.5%. And now you're burning hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of crops. So it's really a farmer play here. It is all about just giving some relief to farmers because especially this crop is so new and the genetics are ever changing. Last year or the year before, I went to a field day at University of Kentucky where they were talking about hemp genetics. And they're like, last year we planted it at 1.25 inches. And this year we planted the seeds at 1.5 inches and we saw stark differences in the way that the crop was grown. And so just 1/4 inch of the way that you plant your seed in the soil could affect the way that it is grown. And I share that because these genetics are ever changing and ever evolving. And so farmers needed just a little bit of relief to let, nature take its course. And they also, background check is a big issue for farmers as well. Most folks are 60, 70 years old and have been doing this their whole life. And the last thing they want to do is take time out of their day to go down to the county clerk and get their fingerprints scanned and feel like a criminal, right? For growing a perfectly legal route. So farmers definitely need a little bit more relief on the ability to grow hemp.
And how is the roundtable approaching CBD in particular as a dietary supplement in these negotiations?
Yeah, that was our big push for years and years and years. HR 841 in the last Congress was the bill that got the most traction, that would have regulated CBD as a dietary supplement. The FDA has been in a finger pointing game with Congress over this issue. Congressman Jamie Comer from Kentucky, who's chair of the House Oversight Committee, brought in the FDA for questioning last year. And part of the questioning was, why are you not regulating CBD? And the commissioner at the time, Califf, said, well, we don't have the ability to do it. Congress, you have to tell us to do it. So again, it is FDA saying we're not able to regulate this product as a dietary supplement. You need to tell us how to do it. Congress is looking at FDA. You should have the ability to do it. Why aren't you? So it's this finger pointing game where what ends up happening is that nothing gets done. And unfortunately, some guardrails that need to be in place to prevent bad actors from selling these products to people that shouldn't have it are flourishing right now. I think in general, a sense I have in this industry is that the regulated marijuana market is over-regulated and the hemp market is under-regulated, and there needs to be some kind of unity here to meet us in the middle, to where having the ability to ship products across state lines and being able to purchase online, these are things that the marijuana industry would love to have, and yet they are too overly restricted and too overly taxed to really thrive as a business, and that's why you see so many of them getting into our side of the industry now. So I see some kind of meeting of the minds, meeting in the middle, to where these companies can start to continue to sell the products that we all know what they're intended to do, and hopefully we can find some kind of common ground solution going forward here.
Here, I think what stands out is what you just mentioned there is, if you look at the evolution of marketplaces, it always starts off with this wild, wild west. It's a gold rush. Everybody rushes in, and then inevitably over time, regulation happens, legislation happens, there's consolidation that happens. And then as we see play out in the recreational cannabis community, you then have a concentration of power for a select few amount of entities, companies, etc. So with that being said, the roundtable often talks about how state level policy is basically this game of whack-a-mole. Every day there's a new state with something popping up, even for the markets that look the most secure and stable. One bill and statute, one rule can have a huge effect on the entire marketplace. So can you give us some recent examples of how challenging it is to basically sit through the state by state legislation and constantly keep a pulse on how dynamic this marketplace has been?
Yeah, it is. You said it, whack-a-mole, right? And so every day I kind of wake up and I'll have a member call me or send me an email and say, well, South Carolina, where I'm based, just introduced this bill. The sky's falling. What are we going to do? And and it also is interesting, on Friday, we always do our roundtable roundup and recaps where we send out alerts on bills that we're tracking across the country. So this Friday we sent out an alert on 8 states, and I got feedback from some folks that it wasn't precise enough and concise enough for people to understand how to take action, right? There's so much going on. I'm not really sure where to take action, right? That was some feedback I got. And then I got other feedback that we did not cover enough states. We should have covered this bill. What about that bill, et cetera, right? And so it is kind of hard, one, to know what legislation has real teeth, what's going to move, what's more likely, where can we have real change, and where is it, not needed. Part of this is on the ground work. So we'll hire lobbyists in a handful of states, usually dependent on where our members might do business or where we think we have an ability to impact real change. And so it's this combination of public and private pressure that allows us to effectively lobby at the state level. We do have a multitude of services that we use that track all the bills, and we try to filter through them and understand, what's the impact. There's also, are we okay with legislation that might be 10 milligrams per serving, 100 milligrams per pack? Okay, unfortunate, but do we live with that versus an outright ban, right? At what point do we want to, that 10 and 100, that sounds reasonable, but what about 2 and 5, right? Well, now it's like, do we want a 2 milligram per serving and a 5 milligram of THC per pack bill? And that's what could become precedent around the country, or do we fight tooth and nail and now we're stuck with a ban like what we are in California? And so some of this is strategy, and some of this is just dependent on, need and where we think we can impact change. But Yeah, and I'll also add that this has been evolving and building over the years, right? When I first got it started, we would track a few states every week, and it feels like now each one is deciding to legislate or regulate us differently. And so, part of this is not only the systems that we use to keep track, but also the members that we have on the ground in their districts. Hey, I'm meeting with this legislator today. This has real legs. We need to impact change here. And so that's where we might activate an email campaign or run social media posts. And so, when elected officials, they are selfish because they want to be reelected. And so when a business owner is talking to them and saying, I've got X amount of employees and I pay X amount of tax dollars, this bill is going to destroy that. Also, I know you heard from 5,000 emails because we ran this email campaign and I've got the report here. And so that's what I mean by that combination of public and private pressures. You're hearing it from your constituents. You're hearing it from the business owners. Hey, maybe this is a bad idea. Maybe there's a better solution to pass here. So it's this big, crazy machine that is kind of hard to quantify that is lobbying, but it keeps me fun and it certainly is a busy time.
Sure. I wanted to drill down on one of the points that you had mentioned. So recently, your Ohio campaign generated, 1,500 emails in about 3 days. So how do you go about mobilizing stakeholders so effectively? It's got to be like, herding cats, so to speak. So how do you actually go about mobilizing these people to get action taken care of?
Yeah, and Ohio is a good example where there was real teeth. Leadership on the House and Senate, Republican leadership on both chambers wanted to ban hemp products, and thankfully we were allowed to. Not only did we get the email campaign activated, but our general counsel, Jonathan Miller, went and testified. We hired a lobbyist on the ground there. We had businesses in Ohio that also were not even in our membership. I was in communication with them. Hey, send out emails to all of your customers and let them know that this bill could destroy the industry. We have some retail members like Your CBD Store, and in the past they have hung flyers up on the shop that's got a QR code that takes them right to the email campaign that allows them to quickly send an email. You just type in your name, your email, and you can hit send. We always have a pre-populated template. We always encourage folks to personalize it. That's always more effective. But also when you're getting thousands of emails in a couple of days, that can really grab the attention of a lawmaker or a legislator and let them know that this is not what their constituency wants. Part of this too is our email campaign and list has been going for over a decade now. So we've been able to slowly grow that email subscriber list and segment based on state or need. And so, it is tricky though, because when you've got 10, 15, 20 states to report on, some of this can get lost in the shuffle. So you kind of have to pick and choose your moments on when you want to raise the alarm and maybe when you just want the public to be aware of something that's happening.
Of course. So with that being said, what are some ways that industry members can get more involved in these state level efforts? For example, someone might say, well, hey, I don't live in that state. This doesn't affect me. But to your point, that might impact their ability to do things like interstate commerce. So how do you go about getting actual industry members more involved in some of these state level fights?
Yeah. And it is tricky because, our platform that we use for our emails is called Voter Voice. And it, by design, does not allow for somebody from Florida to email a lawmaker in Indiana because they are not your constituent.
Right.
And by the design of the way our government is set up, they should theoretically not be worried about their Florida constituency when they're there to represent Indiana. So at the state level, it is focused in on if you live there or do business there, put in that zip code, and this is the way to do it. But also at the federal level, when we have certain bills like the wine bill, that allows us to have, or safer banking, which we have an email campaign up for, like those types of federal bills allows us to have anybody send in emails at any moment. But unfortunately, at the state level, you just got to focus in on the people that live there. And if you do business there, a lot of times a company might be headquartered in Colorado, but they have a distributor partner in Ohio. So they'll leverage that distributor partner in that state to then activate their customers to then participate in the campaign.
Great point.
Yeah. So let's go back to obviously the ban in California. That was a big blow. So and that's happened a few different times in different states, over the years and everything. So what does it look like behind the scenes you kind of went through it a little bit, but from behind the scenes, what does it look like, from an activation standpoint on getting to everyone to, make the change that we want to see?
Yeah. California, we were very, very instrumental in the passage of AB 45 several years ago. And we worked closely with the bill sponsor, Aguilar Curry, on that legislation several years ago. And we were pretty proud of that bill. And so we had leveraged the, well-known lobbyists at the time in California to help, provide industry stakeholder feedback on that bill. And to see where several years later now, that same representative who passed AB 45 was trying to pass a bill called AB 2223, which would all but ban hemp products. And we fought tooth and nail. Now it wasn't just us as the only ones in the room negotiating like it was in 2021. We had a lot of stakeholders, a lot of companies getting involved here, and we defeated that bill. And we were pretty proud of that. And we felt like the governor overstepped his boundaries and came in and decided to, through executive action, ban these products from being sold. And I'm seeing pictures of armored police officers with machine guns going into a grocery store to pick up, some 5 milligram beverages, right? It's just kind of asinine to see and so after, we felt confident about that lobbying victory, didn't just see the governor overstep and issue the executive order. We then, for the first time of my time at the roundtable, decided to get in litigation. We had never done that before, but kind of being the face of California from a hemp advocacy standpoint, they were looking to us to get involved with it. I think we got a bad draw with the judge. There's some things I don't want to say about that judge, that I know that his future is now better because of some of the things that he has promised and did when he was a judge. So, I think that was tough. I think I remember the opening remarks were something along the lines of, so you want to sell THC products to kids? And that was kind of the openings, statement. And so that was like, all right, we're fighting an uphill battle here, right? And so we're still looking at litigation options. There was for federal court possibly. There was a big hemp summit, California Cannabis Summit, I guess I should say, where a lot of the leading hemp and marijuana companies came together a few months ago in Sacramento and have been hashing out a framework for what the two industries could live with. And so hopefully the combination of the litigation effort on the governor, but also a legislative solution that addresses some legitimate concerns about children being able to get access to these products. Hopefully we can have a meeting of the minds and a unified approach once session opens back up again.
Yeah, I don't know the total validity of this because I don't live in California, but I believe I saw in that press conference with Governor Newsom that he was saying that these products were being sold in gas stations and everywhere, and holding up various products that are only available in Total Wine and More.
Yeah,
like it's their only distributor.
Right, the brand that he owns. So
yeah, so that's crazy to maybe not maliciously, but to lie like that in a public press conference. So looking forward, and hopefully a bit more optimistically, what would the ideal federal regulation look like from the hemp roundtable's perspective? What's utopia for hemp in America?
Yeah, I think something along like what the wine bill does. There are some tweaks to it that still need to be done. What's really interesting right now is this debate between three-tiered system and how do we sell these THC beverages at retail? Do we give up power to the alcohol distributors? That's something that really we are working through. And, unfortunately, I'm going to use that word again, whack-a-mole, where it feels like we'll end up with some kind of standardized labeling and standardized truth in packaging, standardized, age gating at the federal level. But then we're going to look at state by state, in some states right now, you can't sell liquor at a grocery store, or you can't sell it online, but you can do it through DoorDash, right? And there's licensing around that. And, I know for the three-tier system, there's a license at every process except for the person who delivers the product. And so how do we cannot license FedEx or USPS or UPS because they are under a different licensing scheme than the alcohol scheme is. So how do we effectively allow for these products to be purchased online? What kind of age gating solutions can we implement? Because most products in the hemp industry are now being sold online. So I think that is kind of where we're navigating right now, is what does it look like to be able to effectively age gate and make these products safely without losing the ability to sell directly to your customer. I'm a believer that if I want to sell Lars my product, Lars gives me his information and I give him the product, right? Or gives me the money, I give him the product, right? I don't need to go through David to be able to do that. And so that is my own philosophy. What it's going to look like on a state by state and what the final solution is might be a little bit differently. So we'll see. And again, maybe next week I'll have a different answer for you because we'll be fighting a different battle and I'll have a different priority. So, but that's where we stand right now.
So with the three-tier system, you kind of touched on it and alluded to it and everything. If the regulations do take us down the three-tier system path, does that mean that direct-to-consumer basically is dead?
We just came out with a statement a couple weeks ago that's the non-negotiable for us. Our members sell 60, 70, 80% of their products online right now. That's where hemp is being sold. Even beverages, as expensive as it is, I understand a lot of those products are still being sold. Now, I can also understand from a business perspective when you've got a contract in hand from an Anheuser-Busch distributor that is going to ensure you get put in 100 stores, and all you have to do is just give up this small market share of being able to sell online, right? I can understand where a business might say, yeah, let's fall in line and do that. That's just part of it too, is some of these guys in the alcohol industry have been doing this for so long, and they are just like, confident is the word, I guess I will say, is like, you're going to go through us and there's nothing you can do about it. Right. That's something
Right.
I think we're facing in Texas right now as an example. And so, but when the 3-tier system was implemented 100 plus years ago, it was because alcohol was killing people in the way they were making it. And 100 years later, now we have a lot better, GMP manufacturing standards, and we have better guidelines to be able to protect consumers that are buying these products. I don't think we need to go back into this distributor model where we give up all this power and ability for businesses to control where they sell their products and when. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see as it evolves.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question to grapple with, because to your point, there's a whole $9 billion plus industry that's direct consumer wine. And so there's already these examples of categories under, say, the liquor bubble that have found a means to sell directly to that consumer. But conversely, the infrastructure that all these alcohol distributors and supply chains have built up over the past 100 years is extensive. And that's going to be one of the biggest capital expenditures if people did want to basically have infrastructure across the country. And so I truly do hope there is this more of a marriage or cooperation, so to speak, than a separation of church and state. But with all that being said, how do you see the biggest opportunities and challenges for hemp over these next few years? Obviously, commingling with the alcohol industry, with the cannabis industry, flirting with the 3-tier distribution system, understanding D2C as a channel as well. How do you go about looking through this horizon and figuring out what those opportunities and challenges might look?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, we have been focused on the extract side of things. I think rightfully so. That's where most of our membership is. But I would be remiss to say if I didn't bring up the fiber, grain, and seed side of this. That is, I think, still a long-term answer and solution for a lot of problems in this country. I think the sustainability aspect to hemp should be brought up at this point. I know we've talked with Patagonia before, and they're like, we like using hemp in our products, but we're not going to do it unless it's cheaper and better than the cotton that we have right now. And we have existing systems that are in place, that have been in place, and we're not going to disrupt it just to say that we have hemp in the product. So as that supply chain matures and as more farmers are able to grow it and they're able to corticate the crop more properly, I'm really bullish on that segment of the industry still. On the cannabinoid side of things, I think some of this too is normalization of the category. I think people are used to having a couple of drinks at dinner and then driving home, right? Not the same for a couple of THC drinks at dinner. I've heard from consumers say that's non-negotiable. I can't do that, which is good if you understand your tolerance. But I think people that are more used to the products might be able to do that. So I'm really interested in seeing. Every time I go to a restaurant, there's always alcohol. I'm really interested to see, as these products become more available on tap, like they are in Texas and Minnesota, what the mixed drinks look like. I think we all know consumer trends are going more and more away from alcohol. I'm really bullish on the ability for folks in their 30s and 40s as they continue to switch over into the category. Low dose, I think, is huge. I think 10 milligrams and under seems to be the sweet spot for that. That's what Specs has told us before is, they started off at 2. Those sold well. So then they started off at 5. Those sold better. And then they went to 10 and those sold even better. So I think that's really interesting to kind of hear the real world perspective. I think, the spirits game, I've seen them being sold in 375 and 750 milliliter, 4 milligram, jiggers is what they call them as you're making a mixed drink in a restaurant, right? That type of normalcy and taking the product on the go when you're out. It's just like, I remember the first time I saw that THC drink on tap at a restaurant in Texas, I was like, whoa, no way that you can do that, right? That is just the coolest thing ever. And there's a spot here in Kentucky called Canna Buzz, I think, or Canna Bliss. And that's all it is. It's a bar where they mix THC drinks and you can buy your edibles there and things like that. So that's where I see it, is this future of it, this normalization of it. But if that's in a few years or a few decades, that your guess is better than mine there, David.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was at Canada DataCon last week, and so we had a happy hour, just like hanging out by the pool, and they have the bar set up, and there's Virtuoso was sponsoring the cocktail hour, and so I think they had 6 or 7 different drinks available, and you just go up and grab one, and we're just hanging out like basically at a party, and everyone just has these cannabis drinks. And that was my first experience in a on-premise situation, because most of the time it's just myself either taking a product with me to the bar, like Fizzy THC. Shout out David right there. And so, yeah, it was really cool just being out and seeing other people enjoying the products and things like that.
Yeah. We had the networking event before our last lobby day in DC, and it was the same thing. We went to we ran out a little spot. Everyone brought their beverages. Aaron from Breeze brought his. Art from Cycling Frog, Bayou City. And I remember we all had a good time, laughing, fun, and we went from like 6 to 8 or 6 to 8:30, and then we all went back to our hotel and went to bed. Right. And I was like, if this was alcohol, we would have been, oh, another one, and then that next day on the hill would have been a lot worse. And I just remember that was great, a couple hours, and then I got to go to bed. It was great. It was a good time, So yeah, that's definitely, I think, the future.
Yeah. Well, Kerry, thank you so much for your time today. Listeners, you can learn more about the US Hemp Roundtable's work at hempsupporter.com. Again, to the listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to check out our YouTube channel as well, where you can watch all of our episodes and more exclusive content. Until next time, guys, cheers.
Thanks.